Crash Bang Wallop, what a show. There's some more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Let's go bashing Americans.
Japanese gaming history unearthed.
And not popular enough.
All this and more coming up on this week's show.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Crash Bang Wallop, Dave. That was a pretty retro line in.
Wallop.
I felt like Alan Partridge saying that. Crash Bang Wallop. Wasn't that the name of like his fake police camera action show that he did? Something like that. Presented.
It sounds a bit right. Yeah. You're a bit of an Alan Partridge figure, I think.
I can. Yeah, I can slip into it.
I don't think so.
And then.
Yeah.
Anyway, back in Grandma's bedroom this week after presenting from the cave last week. Very popular episode last week. So thank you to everyone who tuned in to watch and to listen.
Tuned in.
Wonderful guest.
Yes, Jason.
I thought Jason made some really good contributions to the episode. Really nice insights. And we love that in a guest. Really great. So I hope you enjoyed that too. It's been an interesting week this week, Dave. We've done something terrible at the Retro Collective. You ready? We said we'd never do it.
What have we done? Pinball
tables.
Have you?
Yeah.
I saw a picture of one or two. Where are you going to put the pinball tables? They take up so much room.
We're not going to start introducing pinball to the arcade archive. Just so happened that we bought some arcade machines this week, some really interesting ones, and
some really interesting ones.
Really well, yeah. I won't spoil too much, but the guy selling them was really time constrained, had to get them shifted, and had two pinball tables, and we got them for a good deal. We didn't want them to go into landfill or get abandoned in the warehouse where they were, so we picked up a couple of machines. One being a Spy Hunter arcade machine.
You got that.
And I would love to put that next to an actual Spy Hunter arcade cabinet, have them side by side. That would be cool. The other is a 1961 machine called Egghead I think it's a Gottlieb machine, and it looks just like a beautiful 60s style.
That could be the pinball machine for this podcast. Giving you, me, and Chris with our eggheads.
The Egghead pinball machine. Yeah, I could get Dan to do some graphics of us on there. And I think ultimately what will happen with these is if we can stop Richard from putting them in his garage and playing them on himself, because I know he's been desperate for a pinball table for a long time. Once we've got the garage done, the garage project and the new workshop, I think maybe just one in each corner or in two corners. And that can just be our little... break room pinball machines. We can have an internal scoreboard, or if you come and visit, you can have a little VIP peek and have a little go at it. I'm scared that we will just have too much maintenance if we start putting them into service in the museum.
That's the reason why I've got a virtual pinball table, because otherwise it would be broken all the time.
Yeah. So pinball is now in my life, and they're just lovely looking machines, even when they're not turned on. The other thing I'll mention quickly is, when this show goes out, I mentioned recently in a show our little tide light or tide lamp project, which is this little lamp that tracks the tide at your favorite beach and goes up and down. That Kickstarter is now live. I know it's not retro. I know it's not relevant to the show, other than to say the success of it, as with anything I do, goes back into the museum. It's like one of these many side projects I try to do, whether it's books or vinyls or this, to try and raise the funds to create our goal, which is the ultimate retro computer and gaming museum. So check out tidelight.co.uk if that interests you.
Did you see Ultimate or did you see Ultima there?
The Ultima. Well, if we can get another floor at the mill, we'll have the Ultima floor, Dave.
I have watched this week. I've been watching a 3-hour retrospective on Ultima 7.
Okay.
And it was wonderful.
Who did this?
This was done by a channel that I've just closed the screen on because I put it in the show notes. It's done by a channel. If I keep talking until I get to it, I can say it's Madular. Madular.
Okay.
2 days ago, already 169,000 views on it.
Oh, wow.
This is a fantastic video. It sets the scene for where Origin were coming into Ultima 7 and where the RPG world was, and it talks about the game in enormous detail. But it goes into the problems the game has, because the game has some problems,
Oh, it has
especially
plenty
looking
of
at now.
flaws. Yeah, it
But
is.
also,
It did become a lesson to the games that came after it, for sure, flaws and all.
but it also puts into perspective just how good the stuff was. A continuous world. You could walk anywhere and go everywhere. There was no loading screens, all sorts of stuff like that. Absolutely fantastic. And it actually goes through the game and talks through it. So I would suggest that even if you have no intention of ever playing Ultima 7, but you want to see what was the peak of 1991 RPG, what was the spearhead of the best technology around an RPG, what was 1991 Skyrim or whatever the games are now.
What was a game that was so lustworthy that it persuaded Dave and I to reject our Atari STs and our Amigas and move to PC? It really was that influential for us.
Absolutely fantastic. 3-hour documentary. Even if you just watch a bit of it and then decide you want to, just absolutely incredible. While I've been doing that, I have also been creating my own cloud, Neil.
Have you?
Yes.
Does
I have been using an app called
Audio. Crack a window, Dave.
Audio Bookshelf, so that I've got my own online library of audiobooks and so on, because I'm finding, do you not think these paid subscription services like Netflix and Audible and all the rest of it, do you not sometimes wonder if they've entirely got our best interests at heart?
Well, let me tell you a little story about that, Dave. I was talking before the show about booking my car in for some new brakes. I went to my local garage, which I like very much, booked it in. They said, no problem. Dropped the car off this morning, and then they phoned me an hour later and said, we can't do the job because your car has an automatic handbrake and we need a subscription with the car manufacturer to use the software to unlock the handbrake to change the brakes. I mean, that's too far. That's too far. Yeah. And I think we're going to be seeing an awful lot more of that, because as cars get less and less complex in terms of moving parts and become more and more electric, they're going to be looking for ways to keep milking people in a way they used to, with oil changes or all the other things that the dealers can fleece you on. So
do you not feel that companies have dropped the idea of customer service being a happy customer, and they're just absolutely every penny we can get, we've got you bent over, we're going to take everything we can from you?
Oh yeah. I mean, when did you last call a company and think, I had really nice experience of customer service there? It's just it's become, I'm going to turn into an old man now. How few people can we employ to do the job? How can we use automated systems and we don't care how long you're waiting, we don't care if you hang up. It's
we're exceptionally busy today and every other day. You're always busy.
Press 1 and a robot will call you back. Speaking of robots, we've got some of that in the show later.
Shall we go on with the show, Neil? Or shall we grumble more?
No, stay on target. Blue leader or whatever the...
Red leader, stay on target, stay on target. Turn off your targeting bureau. Use the force. Neil's talking about my T-shirt. I have misled you on the title for the story. I'm not going to go bashing Americans. Mostly. I think I'll let the facts speak for themselves and let you make your own mind up. But I want to also offer a perspective as to why things are what they are, and I hope that Americans will understand why the rest of the world feels this way, and I hope the rest of the world will understand why Americans feel that way. And as with everything, the truth is down to perspective.
Tread carefully, Dave. Tread carefully.
Yes.
We've got plenty of American listeners, and we value all of your ears.
Yes.
But, we'll find out how much Dave values them.
So today's submission is very popular. It was submitted by GoodPunk2, and it's a time extension article written by Damien McFerrin. That's a name we're often saying here about things Damien has said. It was the top submission on the subreddit, so we have to talk about it. And it's a series of blue sky tweets between American journalist Jeff Grubb and British journalist Jazz Rignall. So I do realise it's Neil and I talking about Damien, talking about Jazz, talking about Grubb, talking about what journalists were saying, about what consumers were doing in the 80s. So we are several steps on there are several rungs up a ladder above it, but it is the top submitted article, so we're going to cover it. And I also want to say that if I'm having a go at this American, it's not me having a go at all Americans. It is about the video game crash of 1983, or as we should call it, the North American video games crash of 1983, or maybe better, as we've said before, Atari shock. I like Atari shock.
That's the Japanese phrase for it, isn't it? Yeah.
Atari caused a flood on the market of low-quality console games, and the industry crashed. Atari was blitzed by it and sold off. So that's definitely a fact, and it's beyond dispute. In fact, the fantastic podcast Into the Vertical Blank from the Fulton brothers went into detail about just how devastating it was for them as kids growing up with the Atari to see the whole thing fall apart in front of them and not know what was going to happen to what they loved so much. The shockwave from Atari, of course, affected console gaming in the US, and it's no secret that Nintendo is hailed as its saviour, because when they finally appeared on the scene in North America a few years later with the family computer, which they'd released as the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System out of Japan, that familiar grey box, the console market not just got back on its feet, but it stormed ahead, and it's been storming ahead ever since. The controversy here is a tweet from Jeff Grubb, who says, "The home computer scene created a different set of tastes unaffected by a crash, but it was merely a scene." So he talks about the European micro thing and says, it's just a scene. It's not the same thing as what happened in America. So with that, Jeff consigns the entire British experience in the mid-80s to just a scene, and his justification seems to be that cartridge sales in the UK were small compared to the US.
Well, if anyone can push back on that, it's Jazz Rignall. That, you know, he was in all of our magazines in the mid-80s. So what did he have to say, Dave?
He said, Euro console market was tiny because they were expensive, which is why people bought computers. The Euro market boomed off that, while the US collapsed because of oversupply. People think the crash happened in both places. It didn't. US gaming boomed and stalled. Europe started later and boomed and kept going. And that's right. Yeah,
just to give that some context with when he says they were expensive. So, yeah, I mean, in the early days of, say, a ZX Spectrum, $4.99, $6.99, $9.99 for a cassette, and then down to $1.99 or $2.99 for games. What were you paying for an NES game from sort of 86, 87?
It would have been 25 quid, wouldn't it?
Oh, at least that, 30, 40 quid. So, you know, there was a vast difference in the price for sure. And I think that difference was probably less significant in the US because they like their floppy disks so much more, you know, and they were more expensive.
Yeah.
So, anyway, carry on. Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, the before the crash happened in the US, the UK had already started the boom with the ZX Spectrum in the homes and the BBC Micro in the schools and computers on the television. The future is computers. Get your kids a computer. The future is going to be computing. We went wild for micros in the UK. Most of us had one growing up, if you're from that era. Absolutely everybody I know, everyone I knew had a micro in the house. I did. My friends did. Everyone did. I don't know how that's just a scene. It's not just a scene. You can only say it's a scene from a position of ignorance.
Football is just a scene, Dave, compared to American football.
It's just a scene. That kind of nonsense.
Just a scene.
So the comments in the subreddit, and I think also where our mind jumps to right away, is that Americans are ignorant and short-sighted, and it's a bit unfair. So it's where I'll defend them here. That
won't stop us from clipping you saying that, Dave, though.
Don't do that to me.
Did you hear what Dave said on This Week in Retro?
The US is huge. Europe is fragmented and was more so in the 80s with different languages, dozens of currencies, different markets and different micros. So no wonder so many Americans don't leave their country when they have such a diverse range of states to go to. I mean, Florida, Nevada, California, the Dakotas, the Virginias, New York, New Hampshire, all very, very different places. Complete tropical, desert.
Alaska.
Yeah, Alaska. So there's, without leaving America, you can do all these things. So I get why Americans don't have the global perspective that we might do coming from our small island. But where I would also say they should perhaps sit back down is when they need to realise that. It's reasonable to forgive them for not having that perspective, because why would you? So long as they know that they don't have the perspective and don't just talk as if the USA is everything.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because you can still have a worldwide perspective, but be swamped so much with articles written from an American perspective that you just take it as a given, that you just take it as fact. So, people can be forgiven for that. And it was always nice having John's perspective when he was a co-host on the show, being American. Maybe one day we can find our third permanent host again. This is why we've resisted having a third Brit on the show, because we want to make sure we have as wide a perspective as possible.
We need that. We must have that.
We're thirsty for that worldview.
Yeah. I think we need to realise our own limitations as well. We grew up in the UK. If we're talking about gaming, then we need to be aware that there is the US as well, and of course there's Japan, but there's also what happened in Brazil and Eastern Europe and Central Europe.
Behind the Iron Curtain.
Yeah. All sorts of things going on. Jazz says, just looking at 1985, the C64 sold 1 million units, making around $150 million in a rough estimate of revenue. Where's that money on this chart? Add in the Spectrum, the Amstrad, and that revenue climbs hugely. Again, WTF is that revenue not on the graph? Poorly analysed US-centric garbage, basically, which is a wonderful phrase. Poorly analysed US-centric garbage.
WTF being where to find.
Yes.
Yeah, where to find that revenue on this graph. Yeah. Okay. And the C64 was big in America too, so it's very strange to dismiss that coming from an American's perspective as well. You can't ignore this. It was made by Commodore in America. It was their biggest product. It was huge.
And the Apple II as well, and the Apple II and the Coco and all sorts of things going on. And he goes on to say, and yes, I'm building a full head of, I'm really annoyed steam about all this. Ultimately, Jeff's like, no big deal, man, just a scene. And I'm like, what he's saying is exactly the kind of thing that drives Europeans nuts, because he's perpetuating US misunderstanding of Euro gaming history. Neil, would you like to stand up for our friends across the pond, or would you like to bash them?
Yeah, I mean, to dismiss micros as a scene isn't really defensible, Dave, I'm afraid. The demo scene is a scene. Modding Quake is a scene. Making tracker music is a scene within the industry, within all that. But the entire microcomputer industry in the 80s is not a scene. If you walked into any shop, and I don't mean just computer shops, walk into any shop in the 80s in the UK, and, you'd more than likely, in a lot of shops, newsagents, pharmacists, all of these places.
Electrical shops.
Yeah. You'd find supermarkets, you'd find micro games on sale either in a dedicated area or on a carousel or just hanging on pegs in a corner. My local Superdrug just had the tiniest section of pegs with the card-backed Mastertronic games all hanging up there. So you'd find them everywhere, and you'd also find magazines for every 8-bit platform. Your circle of friends, would all include people who had micros. That's not a scene. That's an industry. And that industry put pressure on everyone else, from console to PC makers, just through the competition it presented by being there. So guilty as charged, Dave, I'm afraid.
And in fact, that's that UK scene turned into things like Rare and Grand Theft Auto, Rockstar. That's it, Rockstar. All the rest of it. So, okay, Neil, how about after I tell you what was an attempt to be Jeff Grubb's last word on the subject, he says, I want to bridge this divide. You think, oh, good, he's going to
got a bridge to sell us.
Yeah. But the way to do that is to recognise that it was a real global games market crash, because it affected people who made games globally. And then also there were massive insulated alternative markets that did not rely on the same global market. Get Grubbed.
Please beep that out, Duncan. It's not a scene, it's an insulated alternative market, Dave.
Yeah. What do you think of that, Neil?
I think we're going into the realm of alternative facts now, aren't we?
Yeah.
Translation. Guys, can you just agree with me, even if I can't substantiate it, please? Thanks. Okay, bye. The Famicom launched in 1983 to massive success in Japan. They called 1984 the Famicom boom in Japan. The ZX Spectrum in 83, which would become so huge in the UK, as well as 1982, the C64, and the other 8-bit micros that followed. So, granted, the games market had to grow for these platforms from a standing start. It wasn't like the Spectrum appeared and thousands of games appeared instantly, but they were not held back by Atari fumbling in the US at all.
And fumbles are understatement, I think.
Yeah, and we shouldn't dismiss the impact of what happened in America for America, and we shouldn't write off any knock-on effects that it may have had outside the region. But to be honest, Dave, when you really think about it, Atari crashing in the US, it was just a scene.
Oh, Neil. I think the important thing here is we must always be aware that we mustn't write out someone's experiences. We mustn't gatekeep what happened. We mustn't say, well, here's the only truth and yours doesn't really matter. So it's not for us to tell Americans what they experienced, what they didn't. If you were a kid in America like the Fulton brothers, you loved your Atari, and then Atari went under like they did and had to be sold and all the rest of it, that must have been an absolute cataclysm for you.
Yeah. I mean, case in point, if you talk to some Americans about their experience of the Amiga computer, for example, it's a very different experience to what we had in Europe. Where, you know, there's a big divide between productivity and gaming, big box and wedge Amigas. They just experienced it in a very different way to how we did over there. And that shouldn't be dismissed. Just because I had, 50 copies of Amiga format and bought as many games as I could for it, I shouldn't be dismissing the fact that somebody else didn't do that in the States because I almost said it then, because the scene over there was so different. But I'm using the scene in a very different context there. I'm using the scene to represent that whole.
You're not using it as a way to say, well, it's not a market, it's a scene.
I'm not dismissing. Yeah.
I mean, of course, the UK would have been different if the Atari shock hadn't happened. If that hadn't happened, perhaps there would have been significant pushing of consoles in the UK. Perhaps they might have been more successful. I don't know. Maybe more consoles were pushed in the UK because of the surplus they had in the US. I don't know. We don't know.
Perhaps we wouldn't have seen the Atari Micros or the Atari ST because Atari wouldn't have split off and Jack Trammell wouldn't have done all of that stuff. So it could have been even worse. You don't know. Yeah.
Whatever happens, the important thing here is, for the last time, the crash was catastrophic in the US, but not in Europe, and the market was different in both places. Both experiences are valid, and you can't just erase another experience just because you only know about yours. So thank you, Jazz, for standing up for us. Jazz hands, says Neil. We are sponsored this week, thank you very much, by PCBWay. Who are PCBWay, Neil?
PCBWay.com, they do PCBs, they do 3D printing, they do CNC milling. Basically, if you've got a little project you want to work on, or a big project, they can do everything that you need. And if you haven't got a project, then browse their shared projects, which I'm doing right now. I'm looking at a DB15 PC game port to be DB9 joystick adapter.
Oh, to use like an 8-bit joystick on a I was watching a video on Kosam's Neptune.
Oh, yes.
From Macho Nacho. Fantastic video. Macho Nacho Productions on his, he even interviewed Kosam on it. And it was PCBWay that made the PCB for it. It looks lovely, the PCB. It's so clean and neat and shiny. It looked absolutely amazing. Again, that was sponsored by PCBWay as well. So thank you, PCBWay, for all that you do. And thank you for sponsoring us.
We all know the first commercial arcade game, don't we, Dave? What was it?
It was called Pac-Man. No, it wasn't. Computer Space.
Computer Space in 1971. And the first commercial console. Oh, this is exciting, Dave. The Magnavox Odyssey in 1972. That also had the first commercial peripheral for a console, which was a light gun. And I managed to get one this week to go with my Magnavox.
Oh, nice.
so I can put that in the case on display. You know, it's
Are we going to get a video in that?
Can do if you want. It's a, you know,
It's first time you've ever done a video when I've said I want one.
A full length rifle, you know, that goes with it. So, yeah, that's going to look nice on display. Anyway, that's the gaming history we all know. That's set in stone, isn't it? Or is it? And this follows on quite neatly from our last story, you know, keep an open mind, always question history, keep digging, keep searching the trench for finds, and keep that open mind, because if you do, things like this story might come to light. So it's widely accepted, says the article, in Time Extension.
Time Extension.
We might as well be sponsored by Time Extension.
Damien, if you ever watch this show, we'd like you to have you on, because Damien, you must be really interesting to speak to.
And submitted by Fourth Directive. It's an article about Japan's video game industry. And that began, it's generally accepted, with things like Astro Wars in 1973.
Astro what?
Astro Race. Astro Wars was the little tabletop game, wasn't it? Astro Race. And then it exploded with Space Invaders in 1978. But ex-user Yota8NSX has shared, that was a good impression, Dave, has shared images of a Japanese train magazine from 1970, which very clearly shows a video game or simulation with a large screen, train controls. Is it a dead man's handle? Is that what it's called in a train?
I think so. You hold it up so that if something happens, you release it and it stops.
And the brake goes off, yeah. In this image, it looks like you have to control the train from a first-person perspective as the driver. Points are scored based on how smoothly you complete the journey, and the ex-user says his memory is a little bit fuzzy, so they were there at the time. But if you scored over 90, you were supposed to get a medal. And that stuck out for me because at first glance, I assumed this was some kind of serious simulator that would be tucked away at the train company. But a medal, that sounds a bit too playful for that. And the user mentions then that it was located at the Furukawa Pavilion. Sorry for massacring that. And I looked into that, and there was indeed an expo here in 1970 called the Exhibition Expo Osaka 1970. So I looked more into the Osaka Expo, and it sounds like a lot of fun. It was an optimistic look at the future of Japan, modern cities, and the use of technology to build great utopias and the like. And it looked like it was really popular. There's even a video of it on YouTube. We'll include a link in the show notes, which I think somebody's filmed from a monorail. Just driving around. Monorails, weren't they the most exciting thing ever when you were a kid? You would go somewhere. Has it got a monorail, Dad? Can we go on it? So there's a video out there you can watch, and you can just see how big and how popular that was. And this was apparently Japan's first World Fair. Now, I've translated the text on the tweet, and it talks about a UK pavilion being there celebrating Puffin Billy from 1813. And
what's Puffin Billy?
It was the first steam train, wasn't it, that we produced?
I don't know. And Stevenson's Rockin', was that?
Well, maybe Puffin Billy was the first engine. I don't know. Do you want to look into that, Dave?
Aye, I might find out.
And then maybe Stevenson's Rocket was the first mass-produced one, perhaps. I don't know. But anyway, Puffin Billy was in 1813. So there was an expo there celebrating, or an exhibit celebrating the UK's railway achievements, which ties in well with this being a world fair and not just about Japan. And the whole display was exhibited by the Japanese National Railways. What have you found, Dave?
I've found that Puffing Billy is the world's oldest surviving steam locomotive. Constructed in 1813 to 1814 by colliery reviewer William Headley, engine wright Jonathan Forster, and blacksmith Timothy Hackworth, for Christopher Blackie, the owner of Wylam Colliery near Newcastle upon Tyne. Newcastle.
There you go. My eye deck. Now, my search, perhaps my worst impression yet, judging by your face there, Dave.
Don't go to Newcastle. They'll find you out.
Why? My search for more information about this display specifically, it didn't throw up much beyond the tweet, but I did translate the game images, and it looks like you were scored on driving time and your stop position or difference, which must have been relative to where you should stop at the platform. Now, it's most likely using a mini computer somewhere behind the scenes here. Yes, Dave?
I remember a stream. You were on Twitch and you were playing a Japanese train simulator.
Oh, yeah, Densha to go.
Yes. And Pillock and I were in the comments demanding that you used the horn. Use the horn! Do, which would fail the simulation for you if you used the horn, but use the horn. But the point of that was you had to make it to the next station at exactly the right time and stop at the station at exactly the right place, I'm fairly sure. So this is the same basic gameplay.
The same thing.
All those years later.
And it also ties in with, the Japanese are so precise with their rail network. I saw an article just last week, I think it was on BBC, that said rail customers got refunded because the train was like 18 seconds late or something like that to the platform. It's like, is that precise? And of course, you've got the bullet train and everything. So I think the bullet train predates 1970, doesn't it? That goes back to the 60s,
I don't know.
I think.
I don't know.
But very much looking
Good
to
film.
cities of the future, technology, and all of that stuff. And I'm pretty sure this simulation or this game is going to be using a mini computer somewhere behind the scenes. It's going to be powered in much the same way that Space War was, which ran on a PDP back in the 60s, or a PDP-1. So it's very exciting to see what looks like an arcade game in these pictures that predates Computer Space. And Computer Space originally, when they were prototyping it, I believe they even used a PDP and then realized that was going to be too expensive to do and had to find other ways around it. But my initial reaction of seeing this and thinking, could this be the first commercial arcade game? Did this predate Computer Space? That was wound back when I looked further into it. But it's certainly the first example I've seen of a Densha to Go style video game. First example I've seen of maybe a first person type video game as the train driver. So really interesting in its own right. And there's also mention of an expo called Computopia at the same venue. Now, I'm not sure if this is part of the same expo or just at the same venue in the same year. But that one says the pavilion was divided into 3 areas: the themes of space, the electronic experimental theatre, and the electronic music gallery. And I think we can hopefully include a picture, which I've pasted here, because it includes a wonderful look at vintage views of the future. This is why I love things like the Osborne Book of the Future, which came out, I think, in 1980 and was republished. You can get it at caveshop.co.uk.
Stop shilling.
But ideas from this Computopia Expo include helping children to learn using robots. Now, how do you use a robot to help a child learn, Dave? Well, I recently saw a Kickstarter last week, which is if you imagine a child's cuddly toy, and, for a long time we've had electronic children's toys that just turn their head, or puppies that do backflips. Well, there's one just launched recently on Kickstarter, which incorporates AI, and it's presented with a view to keep your child having conversations when you can as a parent. That's how they're pitching it. So chat away. A bit scary.
No, there's something wrong about that.
Yeah.
It just seems, I don't know. Maybe
it's not that it's AI. It's that.
Aye.
It's that a relationship can be formed, an attachment can be formed
instead of with you.
Yeah.
I think that's taken away from an important part.
Well, that's 2025. But if we go back to 1970 in this expo, how do you help a child to learn? That's right.
Violence.
A great big long, it's got a picture, a great big long robotic arm that hits the child on the head if they get the answer wrong when they're using their light pen.
I can see the picture you put on there. And I think the thing is, if the answer to the question is not violence, you're asking the wrong question. No, of course this is terrible, and it's a brilliant picture of this. It looks like a hard resin ball on a wobbly bit of metal kind of spring thing, smacking the kid.
Yeah, with a little satellite dish on top of a robot, so it can sort of trundle up to the child and then just go whack. You're wrong. It's terrifying. There's also talk of 3D TV, robot vacuums, and an automatic iron. Wonderful visions of the future if we exclude the child beating aspect of it. Dave, do you like trains?
Well, I'm not into trains, but I do like travelling in them. I think it's very civilised travelling in a train. I remember going in a train in Italy, and that was lovely, travelling up from Rome to Milan in the train. Unfortunately, trains, for some reason, in the UK are more expensive than flying. It's cheaper to fly.
Crazy, isn't it?
Even though I hate flying. Actually, I don't mind being on the plane, but I hate taking my shoes off and putting everything in there and being there 2 hours early and having to go somewhere and park my car and get a bus to the airport. Trains much more civilized.
If you ever do the Channel Tunnel, that's wonderful to get.
I've not
on
done that. No, I'd like to do that.
A pier in a different country. I love that.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you remember being able to stick your head out a train window as well? That was good.
But I remember playing Railroad Tycoon, Transport Tycoon, fantastic games, loved those. And they, whether you wanted to or not, taught you what the name of some of the steam trains, electric trains were, and diesel trains and all the rest of it. I really enjoyed those. But as to this, I don't think it counts as an arcade game. Doesn't feel quite the same thing, but it's definitely not a professional simulator. It's a fun thing you would do at an expo. Here is the technology of the future. Have a go on this. It will be fun for everyone to see. Even if it's only about landing at exactly the right point, they're not going to have other arcade games to play. So this is going to be something really interesting. But we need to move away from the attempt to focus on just one thing as the first and say that's the only one that deserves attention. It's a common theme throughout today's show. There isn't just one story, there isn't just one thing, one event, one market, one scene, one expo. It's worthy of going on into all these different things. So it's really interesting to hear that that in Japan we had something along the same lines as what was happening with Space War and then Computer Space. Going on at the same time, separate but parallel development on what would lead to arcade machines. So it's really interesting to see this, even if it does involve unacceptable violence towards children. Smack.
No doubt Japan had, the electromechanical scene as well. So that, it
must have done.
It just didn't come out of the blue. Yeah. There's an evolution of gaming that gets to that point. So, but interesting nonetheless to see, and another reminder as to why we should keep an open mind and open arms and welcome stories from all around the world that can help to fill in those blanks and to enrich the story of video games history. So more of that, please. Thank you very much.
Housekeeping.
A few comments about crisps. I did a Google and I found out basically Walkers did it this different way to all the other providers.
That's
they
why
didn't
I was
change.
Confused.
Yeah, they didn't. Walkers didn't change things. It's just that Golden Wonder did it one way. All the other crisp manufacturers did it one way, but Walkers ended up becoming the biggest and stuck with their blue and green, and that's why. A few comments about Jason's excellent appearance last week on the show, commented on the fact that he was very overexposed. It's kind of my fault. We sometimes struggle with guests who stream or do other things who have OBS installed, and they try and put everything through OBS and put OBS onto our software, and it doesn't work. And I just said to him, look, give it to us raw. Give us a raw footage. And he took that as not changing anything, which is why he was so overexposed. I really hope Jason will be back. And when he's back, I hope you'll be able to see him as he actually looks like. I'd also like to welcome...
ball of light.
A glowing ball of light. He has ascended to the next plane of existence. I'd also like to welcome on 2 new patrons. So I'd like to welcome Russell and Dan. Thank you, Russell and Dan, for becoming patrons and joining us, becoming official twirlers. Where can people go, Neil, if they want to twirl?
If they want to twirl with us, they can go to patreon.com/thisweekinretro.
Thank you very much to Russell and Dan.
Thank you.
On with the show. The unpredictable Ito is blowing his own trumpet and telling us that his 3rd classic Amiga programming book has been published. Happy to talk about it because he is a proper twerk community person. He's been here for ages. He's not just popping in to shill his stuff and disappear, Neil. In fact, he made the wonderful Bass MX, Neil, the Amiga sound fixer thing. Link in the show notes. Neil, do you think you'll ever find time to program on the Amiga? I know you want to, but will you ever actually get to it?
Well, I have done back in the day, but using things like Amos and Blitz, and like I've said on the show in the past, I'm saving this for when we're in our retirement home together, Dave. That's when I'll do my programming.
And I'll be just saying, look, just play Lemmings with me.
Good Punk 2 submits a Games Radar article about Sony's very impressive PlayStation Vault. 30 years of stuff stored on data tape and kept under high security.
Good on them. Good on them.
Apparently there's over 200 million files going back to 1994 builds of a PlayStation 1 JRPG.
Cyan Worlds, one of the oldest indie developers around and the developer of Myst, have sadly laid off around half of their staff. There is definitely trouble in the games industry. Thank you for Dana the Elf for submitting this PC Gamer article.
Dave's Garage. We talked about his Reefer video the other week. He's now got a video explaining Windows Longhorn, and as a retired Microsoft engineer, even wearing his bomber jacket from it, that's got to be a really interesting video. Thanks to SDMat22 for submitting. And I remember the hype around Longhorn and what we all wanted, the SQL-based file system that never materialized. It was supposed to move us away from the registry. It was supposed to give us the ultimate file system, and it held things up, and then it just didn't happen, and then Microsoft moved on regardless. And then we got Vista, the pinnacle.
I remember a chain of steak restaurants in Florida, and maybe the whole of the US, called Longhorn, and I used to get a great steak out of there. Imagine a chain restaurant doing good steaks. I don't know. Can't get that in the UK. Chain restaurants are always terrible, but in the US, they're great for steaks.
Not since Wimpy closed.
No. Lord Borak 316 submits a video from the Retro Collective.
Who?
It's the Retro Collective. It's a Trash to Treasure series on the Acorn Atom, and this is episode 1. So this is you, Neil. I know I've been craving a good RMC Trash to Treasure for ages, so it's nice to see you back at the coalface. How's it going?
It's going really well. And this is a reflection of the support and help that I'm getting now to free me up to do those Meteor videos. And just wait until we've got that garage done and that dedicated repair space. I mean, we're doing the ultimate Trash to Treasure right now, which is the garage Trash to Treasure. And then once that's done, we're going to be doing some incredible repairs in there. So I'm glad that it's had a good response, putting that up there. And the next episode will be out very soon. Yeah.
Back to basics.
Back to basics.
Trash to Treasure.
Back to basics.
That's what we all love. Since
the rebrand, you'll notice I've done Retro Tea Break, Trash to Treasure, a guest speaker slot, a tech nibble. I've freed myself up with the support I'm getting to be able to get back to basics, and hopefully that's reassuring for people that the rebrand isn't this great knee-jerk change. It's more of what you love, done better, hopefully. Anyway, Squelch411 submits a guide to repairing Commodore datasets, the tape decks for C64s and other 8-bits, and that's from retrotrade.dk.
They're one of the more difficult things to fix. You can't fix them usually with a soldering iron. It's pinch rollers and gears and all the rest of it. They're a nuisance to fix.
You can't just put a new rubber band in them.
No, I'm afraid not. So there is plenty more on the subreddit. Loads and loads and loads. Go and submit an article, go and upvote, downvote, whatever you want to do, add some comments, or just have a browse through.
One other thing, Dave, we can't report on it just yet because we're just hours short of the final decision. But the big Billy Mitchell, Carl Jobs court case will get its verdict any minute now.
So this is Billy Mitchell suing a YouTuber for exposing his lies, is that right?
Yeah.
Allegedly?
Allegedly. So we'll get the judgment delivery soon, and we will find out what the implications are for Billy Mitchell.
I think he'll roll with it.
Do you think?
I think no matter what the outcome is, he'll be fine.
Well, anyway, more on that next week, I imagine.
Yeah. Neil, have you ever heard of a group of people called Games That Weren't?
Have I ever, Dave? Frank gave a talk at the Cave recently, which everyone should watch. And also his wonderful Games That Weren't book is well worth a purchase.
Where can you get the book? Shell it.
Bitmapbooks.com.
Or
caveshop.co.uk.
yes.
I do support Bitmap Books because they're great.
Frank Gasking from there writes about a discovery on the NES, the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System. It is one of my favourite games. In fact, it's possibly one of the most important games ever made, even though it's from the UK and all we had was a scene, not an industry. It's from one of your favourite people, Neil. And actually, I bet, despite what he did to you, which I'll ask you in a minute, he's still one of your favourite people. Beans merchant, blagger, French knight, British officer, doctor. Of course, the only person that could be is the one and only Peter Molyneux. And it's his first big smash hit, the fantastic Populous. Have you forgiven him, Neil?
Of course I have, yes. Yeah. He only stood me up 2 or 3 times for an interview. But, I don't hold grudges.
Populous is such a great game. And I'll always say it's the first real-time strategy that I played. And even though it doesn't quite fit into the genre that Dune 2, Warcraft, Command & Conquer went mainstream with, I still think it's the same kind of gameplay.
Do you put God Game and RTS in the same? I know they're very, very similar, but I always feel like there's a slight divide between God Game and RTS.
I wouldn't class this as an RTS. It's a real-time strategy game because it is real-time and it's strategy. The same kind of things you're doing, but I wouldn't say it's an RTS.
Okay.
And that's the distinction I'd make. It doesn't fit in the same category as what Dune 2 did, because from Dune 2, they all followed fairly closely to that.
Mm-hmm.
So you play as a god, not the god, but a god, and your goal is to have your people be the only people that exist, that remain. You do it through a combination of spreading your people across the map, helping them grow, wiping out the enemy people, converting the enemy people, and protecting your own people. You can move the land, you can turn your people into knights, create earthquakes, volcanoes, and other natural disasters. And each level is a single map, and you skip ahead a few levels depending on how well you won. The better you do, the further ahead in the levels that you'll skip. The basic gameplay is like an RTS. You grow, you expand, you gather a force together, and you attack. Sometimes you'll be waiting and watching your guys gathering resources or spreading out. No resources so much in Populous, but you'll watch the castles fill up with people. But there's no research, there's no special units, and you have almost no direct control over your guys, which is what's a key part of RTS. But just like RTS, at least the ones that aren't super competitive, you aren't necessarily clicking all the time. You're looking to see what the enemy is doing. You're deciding what to do. You'll watch things progress. You'll divert your attention from trying to control your men to trying to build up your lands or defend against enemy disasters. And I got my copy of it reasonably early on for the ST. It was released for the ST and Amiga in mid-89, later on that year for DOS, the year later for the Mega Drive or Genesis and the SNES, and other systems right up to 1993.
Have you gone back and played it in recent years, Dave? Because it is a great game, but it's all about raising and lowering the landscape, and you get it nice and flat, and then things, pop up on that flat landscape. But if you try and do that with a 35-year-old tank mouse in the case of an Amiga, and just trying to hit the peaks of the landscape to raise and lower it, it's quite clunky. And I remember even back in the day, it took a bit getting used to, but I forgave it.
There was a technique. There was a technique to it.
Yeah.
And I remember it wasn't essential in the early levels to get the technique exactly down, but as time went on, the quicker you could terraform the land, the better. So you got into the habit of double clicking to raise it up one and then take the top peak off and quickly smooth out the land, because the more smooth, flat land you had, the quicker and bigger your population grew. I don't like the old tank mouse that we used to use on the Amiga, and in fact, it's worse on the Atari ST. It's bigger and clunkier on the ST. I've got a wireless optical tank mouse for my Amiga from the Kickstarter, and one day I will get Chrissy's help to put an optical mouse inside one of my old Atari ST clunkers, and turn it into a nicer mouse to use, because mice games like Captive and Dungeon Master and this, where it's essential to move the mouse quickly, the mouse has changed so much. The mouse I use now for my computer, I use within, it doesn't move more than a centimetre in either direction. Tiny movements do the big things, whereas the old tank mouse, you to scroll and throw it about the desk to get it to move. Anyway, it did get a Master System port, so that's the Sega's NES competitor, but not the NES. And all they have to say about it is from Darren Melbourne, who was the producer of the game. He says, Imagineer decided that the NES was probably past its prime and they wouldn't achieve the necessary sales. So this is only a few years after the NES kind of came out in the UK and America. It doesn't look quite complete to me, but it does look as if it could have been and would have been a decent game, even if you didn't have a mouse. And it did get me wondering, though, about ports that didn't make it, and maybe that could be a question of the week, Neil. But anyway, what do you think?
Yeah, I always like the atmosphere of Populous. There was like a drum or a heartbeat, doof, 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 and then the wind and the crashing noises and the sounds. Did you get this on the Atari ST thing?
Yes, Neil.
Yeah. It all added to that effect of you feeling like an all-powerful god, and it made you feel like your choices mattered. That's what the atmosphere made you feel like, because ultimately you were raising and lowering a landscape. You were trying to make the land as flat as possible. It doesn't sound like a particularly good game concept.
Actually, to be fair, there were levels where you couldn't move the land and you had to use other things to win.
Yeah, you were building up. Was it your karma? You were building. What was it?
Your mana to use things, and you could put your papal magnet to get the people attracted to that, and you could get your leader to go certain directions, and you could set things on fire and so on. But yeah,
it's been a while. I enjoyed it. I must say I enjoyed Powermonger a lot. Was that
Powermonger.
Really
that was the kind of the one that came afterwards, which wasn't. I never felt Powermonger was polished enough.
Oh, I enjoyed,
but it was much more complicated than Populous.
Yeah, but anyway, it was still great. And I must admit, I've never tried Populous on a console, and I don't know how powerful you would feel, how that atmosphere and that feeling of power would work on a console with a NES pad. But Dave, give me Populous on the NES and a power glove. Imagine that, waving your hand, ignoring the fact that the power glove is terrible. But imagine being able to raise and lower the land with your hand. I could get on board with that.
Standing in front of a great big screen that somehow made it look as if you're looking down, soaring above the land, with one hand controlling where you fly to, and the other hand controlling what you do, enough to blow your headphones off, Neil.
Yeah, exactly. It's just happened there. Microsoft do that great big screen that you looked at, tabletop screen, don't they? I forget what it's called now. But yeah, give us a version of Populous for that, where you can raise and lower the land and throw things at your enemy. Fantastic. Anyway, looking at the demo that Games That Weren't have found, or the game that, the unreleased game that they found, the biggest gripe I have with this on the NES version is that the viewing window, which was fairly small as it was, on the NES compared to the 8-bits, it's even smaller. So you're seeing maybe 5x5 tiles of land in this version on your screen. Really hinders the sense of scale when you're playing it. You don't feel like you can wave your hand over this vast landscape and cause devastation. 5x5 feels a bit more like you're sort of lording it over your back garden rather than over a great big map. So, but that could be just because the game hadn't been fully optimized. Maybe they could have found some more ways to expand that. But
it felt as if they were between working out what to do with it. It looked as if you would press a button to flip between the map and the icons to control, rather than have to move right off the map to the side. In a mouse, which is no problem to do that, you can just quickly go there and back. But with a controller, you can't.
Yeah. So I'm not surprised that they didn't release it, but at the same time, I am, because they released it for the Master System. So that's a bit odd.
Yeah. That was what struck me as odd, because if there's a justification for the NES, the justification for the Master System and vice versa, the two of them were fairly neck and neck in terms of age and all the rest of it. Yeah. There is a link in the show notes. You can go and have a look at the article. And they've also got a video of gameplay for what is there. and go and have a browse at the games that weren't. Even buy the book if you're interested. But yeah, very interesting site to see. And very interesting because Populous is one of the best games ever made. If you've never played Populous, go and play it, or Populous 2.
Time now for our community question of the week. Now, after talking about the re-release last week of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, we asked you what game unsettled you the most. Have you dared to go back to it? Now, Duncan's put his answer in there, and he says, Silent Hill was the first game that really messed with my mind. As you play, you don't really understand what the heck is going on. The atmosphere, the sound design, and even the PS1's unique detail, yet glitchy graphics, all play part in creating something very spooky. Even the tank controls make you feel vulnerable. Dunk. It's like
when did Duncan become Farmer Maggot and move to Bristol?
Sorry, he did go a bit into the Shaun the Sheep Farmer there, didn't he?
Quantum Bovril has the first answer, and he says Horace goes skiing. When he turns to the left, his eyes stare into oblivion itself.
What eyes? They're just holes where his eyes have been scooped out. Yeah, quite horrific. Do I read the next answer or do I skip over that? Disgraced former TV presenter based show. It's me thyroid. Thank you for your contribution. But I'm going to move on to Happy Coding ZX. He says, for vintage Phantom Slayer on the Dragon 32 is a very early example of survival horror / FPS. Your goal is to survive as long as possible in a maze patrolled by hooded phantoms. The tension is massively vamped up by the computer emitting a low warning beep that tells you when one is near. Unlike 3D Monster Maze, you have a gun and you can survive if you react quickly enough. I used to play it in the dark and scare myself witless, or something that rhymes with that. For modern gaming, nothing quite beats the eeriness of the Fatal Frame series, which truly captures the tension and threat that comes from the best of Japanese horror films.
He used to play it in the park, I think he means.
Did he?
He says he used to play it in the dark and scare myself witless, or something that rhymes with that. So it must be the park.
Must be in the park. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, Dave. Phantom Slayer I haven't played. When he was describing it, I didn't think of 3D Monster Maze, but with a gun. That's, that is truly a very early FPS if you've got a gun. He's got a shooter.
Jeff Mendoza says Resident Evil on the Saturn. I wasn't even playing. My friend was, while I helped out with puzzles, remembering stuff and moral support. I have gone back to subsequent Resident Evil games, but I'm never playing the first one alone.
More answers from all of you. Thank you so much to everyone who's contributed. Colony Activist, that blooming dog jumping through the window in Resident Evil. Dana the Elf, Resident Evil Remake. Nice detailed answer from Dana, thank you. Big Hot Sausage 1 says 3D Monster Maze on the ZX81. Anyone else jump out for you?
Dungeons of Daggerath and the TRS-80 Coco.
Doom 3 on the Xbox from Christ of YDU. The original Halo. How is Halo spooky? Ori Gunner. When you first encounter the flood and the sheer quantity of enemies rushing at you. Okay, freaked me out a bit.
So much Resident Evil.
Yeah. Friday the 13th from Imaginary Swing. Did you ever have that on your Amstrad? It was terrible.
Yeah, it wasn't very good. Another one that I should say is Dungeon Master. Dungeon Master creepy. Did scare me because it had this. There was no music, and there was no kind of ambient atmospheric sound. So all you heard was when things happened, and you could be suddenly surprised by a monster creeping up on you. It scared me, but nothing as much as Alien and the Amstrad CPC. Aliens, yeah. Right, thank you everyone for contributing, and don't forget, if you do see any interesting stories that you want to share about retro things, head to our Reddit, reddit.com/r/This Week in Retro, and you will also find the community question of the week to participate in there, which brings us on to this week's community question of the week, which is, Dave, which game didn't get a port to a particular system that you think it should have? And what was that game? What was that system?
Damocles on the PC.
Yes.
Still waiting for it.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be fantastic.
So the previews.
Although there are modern versions of it.
Never came. Yeah, but there was a PC specific one that was never released. We just got the previews of it. Anyway, head to our subreddit to participate in that. Hope you enjoyed the show. And if you really enjoy what we do head to patreon.com/thisweekinretro, where you can buy us a cup of tea, cup of coffee, and support us. Primarily support Duncan. He's the one that needs the support here, not us. But come and support us. And see you on next week's show. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Take care and bye-bye.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil from the Retro Collective and Dave. It was produced by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/thisweekinretro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.